Deep in the darkest layers of the ocean, far below where sunlight can ever reach, lives a creature so strange, so serpentine, that for centuries sailors mistook it for a sea monster. Silver, ribbon-thin, and capable of growing longer than a city bus, it moves through the water with an eerie, undulating grace. This is the oarfish. Its scaleless body shimmers like liquid metal, crowned with a wild red dorsal fin that some early explorers swore looked like a crown of fire. It has no swim bladder, no true scales, and eyes built for a world where the sun has never once shone. And in Japan, it carries a nickname that sounds less like a name and more like a warning, the doomsday fish. So is this deep-sea giant really a harbinger of disaster, a messenger sent to warn us before the ground shakes? Or is there something far more interesting going on beneath the myth? Let's find out what's legend, and what's real science, one story at a time. Here's the first myth worth putting to rest, that oarfish sightings predict earthquakes. This belief comes from Japanese folklore, where the fish is called Ryugu no Tsukai, the messenger from the sea god's palace. According to the legend, when oarfish rise to the surface or wash ashore in unusual numbers, a major earthquake follows soon after, sometimes within weeks. It's a striking story, the kind that spreads easily because it feels like it should be true. And on the surface, a few dramatic cases seem to support it, including a cluster of oarfish strandings in Japan shortly before the devastating 2011 Tohoku earthquake, a coincidence that was reported so widely it practically cemented the legend for a new generation. But when researchers actually sat down and tested the claim properly, the story fell apart. A 2019 study published in the Bulletin of the Seismological Society of America combed through decades of oarfish sightings and cross-referenced them against Japan's seismic records, and found no statistically meaningful correlation at all. The myth persists not because the evidence supports it, but because humans are wired to notice coincidences and remember the hits while quietly forgetting every single miss. For every stranding followed by a quake, there are dozens more followed by absolutely nothing. Next, the idea that oarfish are simply too rare and too elusive to have ever been properly studied, that they exist more as legend than as a documented animal. It's true that live sightings are extraordinarily uncommon. For most of human history, everything we knew about the oarfish came from dead specimens that washed ashore or floated to the surface, decomposing before anyone could observe how they actually lived. The first confirmed video of a living oarfish in its natural deep-sea habitat wasn't captured until 2001, by the U.S. Navy, almost by accident. But rare doesn't mean unknown forever. In the years since, remotely operated vehicles working in the Gulf of Mexico have filmed multiple live encounters at depths of over 300 feet, including a landmark set of 5 separate observations published in the Journal of Fish Biology in 2013. Scientists have watched the oarfish swim in a distinctive vertical posture, head up, tail hanging below like a pendulum, undulating its long dorsal fin in a continuous ripple to hover and steer with astonishing precision, something no textbook illustration had ever captured before real footage existed. Each new encounter adds a little more to a picture that, until recently, was drawn almost entirely from guesswork. Then there's the myth that oarfish are aggressive sea serpents, dangerous to any diver or sailor unlucky enough to encounter one. This idea comes straight from centuries of maritime folklore, where any long, silver shape gliding beneath the waves became a monster in the making, a kraken, a leviathan, a sign of doom. It wasn't just a Japanese phenomenon either. Norse sailors told similar tales of enormous sea serpents coiling beneath their ships, and Scottish and Scandinavian coastal legends describe eerily similar creatures long before anyone had a name like oarfish to put to them. Some historians even argue that oarfish sightings are the biological root of the entire sea serpent legend that spans dozens of unrelated cultures across the globe, a single real animal, glimpsed rarely and half decomposed, inspiring centuries of myth on opposite sides of the planet. But the reality is almost the exact opposite of monstrous. Oarfish have no teeth capable of harming a human, no venom, no claws, and no documented aggressive behavior of any kind. When they're spotted in shallow water or found stranded on beaches, as happened in a widely shared video from Baja California, Mexico, researchers say it almost always means the animal is sick, disoriented, injured, or dying, not hunting or attacking. In several documented cases, bystanders have actually waded in to help guide stranded oarfish back toward deeper water, with mixed success, since a fish built for crushing ocean depths often can't survive long near the surface regardless of how it got there. Here's a myth about their size, that reports of 30, even 50-foot oarfish are exaggeration. Fishermen's tales stretched a little further with every retelling. They're not. The oarfish is the longest bony fish species on Earth, a title it holds by a wide margin. Reliably measured specimens have reached 26 feet in length, and based on partial remains and extrapolated growth patterns, researchers believe the species may grow to nearly 50 feet long. To put that in perspective, that's longer than a school bus, gliding almost silently through total darkness, thousands of feet below the surface where sunlight has never once touched. Despite that staggering length, oarfish are surprisingly light for their size, with a thin, laterally compressed, ribbon-like body that can weigh only a few hundred pounds even at maximum length, built for graceful drifting, not raw bulk. Now here's a myth that even surprises marine biology students, that an oarfish, once injured, is simply doomed, with no way to defend itself against a predator that manages to catch it. In reality, the oarfish has a strange and remarkable trick up its sleeve. Scientists have documented that oarfish appear capable of shedding portions of their own tail, a kind of self-amputation, not entirely unlike a lizard dropping part of its tail to escape a predator's grip. Specimens have been found in the wild missing significant portions of their back half, with the wound healed over cleanly, suggesting the animal survived the loss and kept swimming. It's a strange, almost alien survival strategy for an animal already shaped like nothing else in the ocean, trading length for life when the situation calls for it. And finally, a myth about where oarfish actually live, that they're bottom dwellers, crawling or slithering along the ocean floor like something out of a horror film. In reality, oarfish are pelagic, meaning they live suspended in the open water column rather than on the seafloor, typically at depths between 600 and 3,000 feet, the mesopelagic and upper bathypelagic zones, sometimes called the twilight zone, and the beginning of true darkness. They never quite touch the bottom under normal circumstances. Instead, they drift and undulate slowly through this vast midwater realm, feeding mostly on tiny shrimp-like krill, small fish, and zooplankton, filtering the deep for food the way a grazing animal might drift across a field, patient, passive, and almost entirely harmless. Even their reproduction remains largely a mystery. Scientists have found their eggs and larvae drifting near the surface, but almost nothing is known about how, when, or where adult oarfish actually spawn in the wild, a gap in our knowledge that reminds us just how much of this animal's life still plays out completely unseen. So what's the real story of the oarfish? It's not a messenger of disaster, and it's not a monster waiting in the dark to be summoned by a coming catastrophe. It's something far more remarkable, a gentle giant, perfectly adapted to a world without light, that has spent millions of years quietly drifting through the deepest, quietest layers of our oceans, almost entirely unseen by human eyes until the last few decades of underwater technology finally let us look. It's worth remembering just how recently our scientific understanding of this animal even began. The oarfish wasn't formally described by Western science until 1772, when Norwegian bishop and naturalist Peter Ascanius examined a specimen and gave it the name Regalicus glest. For nearly 200 years after that, almost everything scientists could say about the living animal was pieced together from corpses, stranded on beaches, tangled in fishing nets, or found floating dead at the surface, already decomposing in the sun. An animal that spends its entire life 1,000 feet down doesn't exactly volunteer itself for study, and it's only in the last 20 or 30 years, with cameras finally able to survive the pressure and darkness of its world, that we've started to see the oarfish as it actually lives, rather than as it happens to die. Every sea serpent story, every doomsday legend, every panicked headline after a beach stranding, all of it traces back to the same simple truth. humans fear what we don't understand, and for most of history, we understood almost nothing about this animal. Even today, with underwater cameras reaching farther than ever before, the oarfish still spends the vast majority of its life completely beyond our view, spawning unseen, growing unseen, aging unseen, in a part of the planet that remains more mysterious to us than the surface of the moon. Maybe that's the most fascinating myth-busting fact of all, that the creature humans turned into an omen of catastrophe is really just one of the ocean's most peaceful, most misunderstood residents, still drifting quietly in the dark, completely indifferent to the legends we built around it.